The June 27th, 2011 meeting of the Agenda Charter Committee will now come to order. Will the clerk please call a roll?
Mr. Barker, Mr. Eckel, Mr. Esposito, Mr. Howland, Chairman Yolovich.
Here. Is there anyone signed up for the public forum?
No, there is not.
I don't see anybody in the peanut gallery back there, so I don't imagine we're going to have anyone else that wants to speak. Next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. You have the April 25th, 2011 minutes before you. They will stand approved unless the clerk is notified of any changes by the end of the day. Next item on the agenda is new business.
Referral 11-165, enforcing legislative oversight of pension.
Moved by Legislator Eckel, seconded by Legislator Esposito. I see that the author of the resolution is here. Legislator Haney, would you like to speak to it, sir?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the courtesy of the chair in addressing the committee. The issue that I'm raising in this introductory, Mr. Chairman, is not the propriety of the deferral. That is, whether the county should have done the deferral or not done the deferral. That's a totally separate question. The issue that I'm raising in the referral is that for an action that commits the county to a liability for the next 10 years, there ought to be some role for the legislature in that process. That before the county commits itself to a sizable commitment, in this case, the amount of the principal is $6,139,000. With the interest at 5%, the interest in the first year will be $300,000. The annual payment in each of the next 10 years will be about $750,000 a year. So the county has made a budgetary commitment for each of the next 10 years of about $750,000. Now, as I say, Mr. Chairman, the issue isn't whether that was a wise action or unwise. That's a totally separate issue. The only issue I'm raising in this referral is that before the county incurred that kind of a long-term liability, there ought to be a role for the legislature in authorizing the county to incur that kind of a liability. While it's legally different from borrowing on bonded debt, in which the legislature obviously is the approving party, the effect is actually the same as bonded debt. We have a $700,000 a year liability now, or $750,000, I would guess, for each of the next 10 years. That is as much a liability as if we had issued bonds. So I personally believe that the incurring of that kind of a liability should, before it's done, have the approval of the legislature. And as I say, this is not, I don't raise the question of whether the action was a good one or a bad one. The only issue I raise is that the legislature, as the representative body of the voters of this county, should have a role in approving that, just like they do with bonded debt.
Thank you, Legislator Haney. Is there any further discussion? Legislator Eckel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to reiterate what my colleague, Mr. Haney, who authored this legislation, said, is that we borrowed from the future to do this. And whether or not that was a good decision, that's past decision, and that's not in question here. But we have $1.5 million, roughly $1.5 million to $3 million in debt service that we'll be paying on this over the next 10 years, which is an exorbitant amount of money. That's huge. I think I agree with my colleague that we need to have some kind of oversight of this. To spend an extra $1.5 million of county tax dollars needs to come before the legislature, at least to get our approval. So we know that this is happening. This happened quickly. It happened, and I understand what was going on and what we needed to do to balance our budget. It saved us from a huge amount of debt. But what we're doing is we're borrowing from our future. We're borrowing from our children who eventually are going to be paying this. And I really agree with my colleague in that we need to have some kind of oversight of this. We can't just allow the administration to borrow and spend our future without at least coming before the legislature and saying, hey, look, this is what we're doing. So I urge my colleagues to approve this and pass it on to the full legislature. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Opposed. Motion fails. Are there any other matters to come before this committee? Hearing none, there being no further business, the June 27th, 2011 meeting of the Agenda Charter Committee stands adjourned. The next meeting of the Agenda Charter Committee is scheduled for Monday, July 25th, 2011 at 5:30 p.m. Thank you.